So really quickly, if you've heard us speak, if you've heard me speak anywhere, you've seen these 4 harms of industrial animal agriculture. So you know, for example, that industrial animal agriculture contributes more to climate change than all emissions from the entire transportation sector combined, right? So all planes, trains, automobiles on Earth combined. Um, you know that UN scientists say that it's one of the major causes of the world's most pressing environmental problems, whether they're large or local, big or small, whether they're terrestrial or ocean-based. You know that chickens take in 9 calories of input to give you 1 calorie of output in the form of flesh, which is an insanely inefficient food system leading to all sorts of food insecurity. You know that as we speak right now, African swine fever is killing half of the pigs in China, which is 1/3 of the pigs in the entire world because of antibiotic use that's indiscriminate in factory farming. And then you know, of course, of the animal welfare implications of industrialized animal agriculture. But all of these things have been known for the last decades, right? And none of that really changed consumption habits over the last decades until very recently. And the reason for this is very simple. It's behavior change is really difficult. Telling people to eat something that's different from what they wanted to eat on the basis of morality is an extremely unlikely proposition. Overwhelmingly, the factors which dominate consumer behavior, consumer choice, are the ones that you can kind of tell intuitively. And this is borne out by studies over and over and over again. These are taste, price, and convenience. In some countries, health may play a role. In some countries like China at this point, especially because of recent issues and also because of the current issues stemming from eating wild animals, food safety may play a role. But overwhelmingly, stably, across geographies, even across demographics, taste, price, and convenience do dominate in terms of what dictates consumer behavior. And just to underline our own theory of change, this is why the Good Food Institute exists. We realized, or our founders realized early on, that they had been trying to tell people to eat different things for decades, but nothing had changed. So despite the increasing awareness of all of these various issues, global meat consumption has continued to rise over the last decades. So what's changing now? We're seeing all over the world, we're seeing companies like Impossible Foods and Beyond Meat really making an impact in terms of being launched in thousands of food service locations. Beyond Meat went public on the New York Stock Exchange early last year, and it was the most successful IPO in 20 years. Hugely encouragingly, something like 80%, 90% of the consumers that are eating these products are meat eaters, which means that instead of eating a beef burger, which is incredibly damaging to the environment, for that meal, they ate a Beyond Burger or an Impossible Burger. So the thing that's changing is very simple. What you're seeing on the screen right now is, for all intents and purposes, a beef burger. From the perspective of taste and the perspective of convenience, the form factor that people like, it is a beef burger. It's just made differently. So the consumer is abstracted away from this moral choice, and they just make a decision on the basis of stuff that matters to them. So it feels like a simple switch and not a sacrifice. What's really interesting here is from the perspective of price, which was the one that I didn't mention just now. These burgers launched at a very high price point, at a Michelin star price point, maybe $23, $25. And then they very rapidly went down to fast food scales. They very rapidly went down to White Castle. They very rapidly went down to the Burger King type prices. So that's kind of the power of what you can do with technology as you scale up. So what this means overall is that we're seeing an explosion in the types of food that we can make underpinned by technology that satisfy those 3 underlying factors that matter overwhelmingly above everything else: taste, price, and convenience. So give people what they want, made in a different way. But taking a step back, we know that Americans eat a ton of burgers, right? So Americans consume 3 burgers a week, which is, it's just an incredibly damaging habit. If you actually replaced one of those 3 burgers a week with a Beyond Burger, it would be the equivalent of taking 12.2 million cars off the road or powering 2.3 million additional homes. So this is clearly a hero category, which is magic for an entrepreneur. So you can look at this and say, look, this is a behavior that's so homogeneous that I'm going to target this, and it's going to be my one hero product, which has worked extremely well in the US. But if we asked everyone on this call right now to have a poll, if we did a poll in this call right now and we asked what is the national dish of India, I don't think we would agree in terms of what the national non-vegetarian dish of India is, right? So you'll see on the screen here, there's biryani, which is actually a really great candidate because it performs extremely well. Swiggy sold something like, Shardul, what was the number? 73 biryanis every 60 every 60 seconds. Yeah, 73 biryanis every 60 seconds. So that's more than a biryani a second. You also see keemas there, which if you've ever eaten meat in your life, you know that keema, kebabs, biryanis, these are all delicious foods that people in India love. You also see some curries there, like the prawn curry to the top right. These are all really interesting categories of food that are actually eaten differently even in different parts of the country. So something that's eaten in the South is a new behavior for someone in the North, right? So fish, for example, is not really eaten a lot in the North. But one thing that makes a lot of sense in India is the category of chicken. So chicken being a versatile meat that's eaten everywhere, and that's farmed very similarly or starting to be farmed very similarly to how industrial animal operations exist in places like the US, is possibly the place to look. So something like 60% of total volumes of meat eaten in India are chicken. So whether it's globally or whether it's in India, chicken is basically going to be the hero category moving forward. Another one that's predicted to grow a lot in India over the next decades, actually aided by the government, which is trying to really increase farming of fish, is fish. So that's something to look at as well. But fish is of course extremely complex because there's many different kinds of fish, and you don't quite know whether people are going to want to eat an oily fish or a non-oily white fish, or what exactly people want to eat. So chicken seems to be the place where people are squarely focused, and that strikes me as pretty reasonable. Of course, in the background in India, you do have the kind of religious underpinnings that create a lot of confounding factors in India. So while we're seeing differences in how people eat across different states, a lot of this is homogenizing over time. So as people, for example, start becoming more urban, more westernized, particularly in younger cohorts, you are seeing to a certain extent, people eat differently than their parents and grandparents ate. But the underlying point of religion being sort of a divide in terms of how people eat still stands, right? So in 29 states, cow slaughter is still banned in India, for example, and this is a point of religious contention currently. Meanwhile, we are seeing that there is a lot of protein demand, both across corporate India as well as in consumer cohorts. So within 4 years, between 2013 and 2017, the number of packaged goods that released in India with a high protein claim doubled. Now, these high protein claims may not be the most credible, right? So a lot of these claims could even be seen as somewhat spurious, because you're seeing, for example, a protein bread that doesn't necessarily have a better macronutrient ratio, better carb to protein ratio than regular wheat bread, being marketed as high protein bread. And a lot of this is, of course, related to regulation about labeling on protein and all of these different things. But the point remains that the market is currently converging on protein as a major opportunity. And you'll see, for example, if you've grown up in places like Mumbai and Delhi, you'll see buses going around with billboards, buses and billboards saying things like, fix your protein deficiency, drink cow's whey or whatever, drink whey protein. And that's something that I never saw growing up, but these are anecdotal things that you see all the time that clearly point to the fact that there is a protein demand, or at least the market is converging on supplying more protein to the Indian population. And that actually strikes true from a nutritional standpoint, where protein energy malnutrition is being seen internationally more and more as an area of focus in the nutrition community as well. So all of this is to say that even though we have all of these confounding factors and all of these cross-cutting considerations of religion, of people moving away from their parents, moving away from joint families, moving into cities, becoming increasingly urban and westernized, you have young people, and we will have the most young people in the world. We will be the youngest country in the world in 2020 with a median age of 29. You have young people that are eating increasingly like our global counterparts, right? So in many ways, there's a cohort of Indians in a place like Mumbai or in Delhi, Hyderabad, Bangalore, etc., that eats more like their counterparts in Singapore than they eat like their counterparts in the neighboring city. So these are all things to consider in terms of the fact that people are all on Instagram. If we think that people aren't aware of what's going on with Impossible Foods, that Snoop Dogg, that Kyrie Irving, that all of these folks have been promoting these foods, we'd be sorely mistaken, because youth today are absolutely aware of what's going on. I mean, when we speak at events, it's quite clear to me that people who are younger than us, even people who are in college still, are totally aware of what's happening internationally. And that's very similar to the trend internationally, where up to 25-30% of millennials and Gen Zers are saying that they consider themselves primarily vegetarian or primarily vegan, which is a huge number internationally. So what we're saying and what we're seeing is that plant-based protein can be a very interesting middle ground, which supplies people with meat-like texture, meat-like flavor, but without all of these issues of religion and without all of these culture wars. It's essentially an interesting way to see if we can sidestep all of these issues, to see if we can supply, for example, Tuesday, Saturday protein, right? So people who don't eat meat on Tuesdays and Saturdays, or who don't eat meat during Shravan, because this would not be coming from a slaughtered animal, it would satisfy those requirements as well. So these are all really interesting considerations to bear in mind. And we're going to be conducting a lot of research over the next 6 to 9 months to see if we can disprove some of this as well. We've already done some research to check our hypotheses a little bit. So I was part of a study in this journal, Frontiers in Sustainable Food Systems, which we conducted in 2018 and published in early 2019, where we had 62.8% of Indians saying that they were very or extremely likely to try plant-based meat, as opposed to only 33% Americans. Now, this is theoretical acceptance. We had the number of people that took the survey in India was 1,503. I'll talk a little bit about that sample, but what's really encouraging is subsequently another organization called Ipsos, which does sort of mass consumer research, also carried out a similar cross-country study, and they got to almost exactly the same number, which is interesting validation. But we're going to try and replicate these studies as well and see how we can do them across different cohorts. So a little bit of information on that sort of early adopter cohort that we were able to analyze. The first thing is the numbers on chicken and mutton are much higher than anything else. And this is common sense. This goes to what I was saying earlier, that chicken is so overwhelmingly the most commonly eaten meat in India that it makes sense that people would want to try exactly what they're currently eating. That being said, there is something about red meat that makes it more of a luxury meat. So mutton was definitely something that people wanted to try. It's also worth noting that mutton is currently an unorganized supply chain in India. So it's really hard to get mutton at a price that's quite cheap. So even if, for example, not in this cohort of people that we interviewed, but if you go to an urban slum in Mumbai and you talk to people there, and organizations like the Tata Trust do this all the time. So if you go and talk to a family of four there, they will tell you, we spend for a family of 460 rupees a week for one mutton meal, which is it's a significant expense. If it were possible to spend 920 rupees a week for 2 mutton meals, we absolutely would, right? So that's something to note, that the fact that mutton is an unorganized supply chain keeps the price quite high. And it's something that presents an opportunity for someone that wants to get involved in plant-based mutton. Some of the other characteristics of this early adopter population was that they skewed slightly female. They also skewed slightly liberal and higher income. And something like 89% of them were actually college educated. So none of that is a surprise. It makes sense that they were younger, liberal, college educated, possibly aware of climate change issues, and they wanted an option to try something that gave them what they wanted to eat, but without some of those negative consequences. And of course, most of them ate meat. So 76% of them actually ate meat relative to didn't eat meat. And that's just worth noting here. Just putting a pin in this right now. So for us, we definitely focus at the Good Food Institute on creating products that mimic meat, because the problem that we are trying to solve is giving people an option to replace meat consumption. So if people are eating entirely vegetarian diets, that's great. And we would love if someone were able to supply them with high quality protein. But that's not our area of focus. That being said, we think that products like even jackfruit, that's not modified greatly to taste like meat. Products like tofu, products like tempeh, things that are sort of high protein, tasty, center of plate, vegetarian products have a lot of room to grow in India. We don't focus on that, but we'd be happy to supply literature to anyone that wants to talk to us about that. So yeah, ultimately, one thing to note here is that, sorry, whoever's talking, if you don't mind muting, please. Thank you so much. But yeah, so one thing to note here is that any study that's ever been done has always indicated that consumers are willing to try anything and make changes, but never at the cost of taste. So especially in a country like India, which is very rooted in a food culture that's quite diverse and quite rich, ultimately everything I'm describing is moot. We can try and optimize products on the basis of labeling, on the basis of positioning. If they don't taste the way that consumers want them to taste, they will fail. And a secondary consideration or an additional consideration in India, of course, is they have to cost exactly what consumers need them to cost as well. Because consumers in India are very price sensitive as well. But overall, it's really important to remember that the overriding factors, as I was saying right at the beginning, taste and price are the things that are going to dictate the success or failure of your product. What's really interesting here as well is there's something like 80% of meals that are eaten in India, even on platforms like Swiggy, are just Indian meals. So comfort food in India is Indian food. So if you're looking at global formats, if you're looking at burgers, if you're looking at anything, you have to localize them to India. There's very, very, very famous case studies about this, right? So McDonald's is one where the Indian menu is possibly more distinct from the US menu than pretty much any other menu anywhere in the world. I think maybe Japan, etc., have different things as well. But the Indian menu is so distinct from the US menu, and it's been a huge success for that reason. And then ultimately, there are finally some consumer considerations that are converging on this as well from the perspective of health, sustainability, and trust. So that's it. I'm gonna close there for now. I should say that we are conducting, once again, a lot of in-depth consumer research over the next 6 to 9 months. And some of you have already provided feedback on our in-depth agenda there. But we'll be reaching out to more of you as well, especially if you're ready to kind of launch products in the market, to see if there's any questions that you might want to include in that. So thank you so much.
Okay, I think we have a couple of questions. One is from Arun. That currently he's asking about the protein perception, the consumption perception, and its dietary gap in India. So Varun, any insights on that?
Yeah, so this is part of what we're going to be surveying people on is what is the exact nature of protein seeking behavior across different demographics. So whether it's kind of mothers versus Gen Zers, et cetera. But overall, protein definitely has a halo effect. The important thing to note is that like people in India aren't necessarily thinking about protein distinctly as they are in the West, unless they belong to a very specific cohort, which is urban, upwardly mobile, westernized, educated, right? Then they're thinking about macronutrients, they're thinking about protein, they're thinking about what's my B12 levels, what's my D3 levels as well. Those are the things that they're thinking about. Broadly in India, people are thinking about food and not nutrients. In fact, there are some famous results from other organizations, like Mintel had a study which showed that something like 71% of people that they surveyed thought that vegetables are high in protein, which is not true. So that's just something to note, that awareness of protein and misnomers about protein are pretty difficult to gauge in India. Overall though, it's getting more and more of a halo effect, as I was saying. So people are advertising on the basis of high protein. People are putting billboards up saying, fix your protein deficiency, etc. So maybe over time, there'll be more and more people who are just demanding protein, regardless of which cohort they come from.
Great. We have one more question which seems interesting about lack of vitamin B12 and D3 in some of the plant-based meat products, and how would basically companies who are innovating in this sector tackle it?
I don't see the question. I'll just answer it as you asked it, Shardul. So yeah, I mean, so that's interesting. It's important to note that the people that are formulating these products are quite intelligent, right? So they're seeing around these corners of micronutrient deficiencies and macronutrient deficiencies and all of that stuff. So for example, the Beyond Burger contains 4 times as much iron as a regular beef burger. So that's just something to note. With respect to B12 and D3, I think overall everyone should take that. This is my personal view. Everyone should take a supplement regardless of whether you're eating meat or not eating meat. Everyone is deficient in India in D3, and probably around the world too. But yeah, it's important for producers who are making these products to address this stuff head on and make sure that they meet that very high bar for nutrition, because this is one of the first questions that consumers are going to ask.
Great. There are some more questions coming in, Varun. So, but given the time that we have already crossed, I think we should start with Andrew's presentation for the time being.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm really excited about, we're all really excited about Andrew's presenting here today. We've been working with Big Idea Ventures to see how we can stimulate the entrepreneurial ecosystem in India for some time now. Andrew's a bit of a legend in the food investing world. I think he's one of the people in the world who has made, or who has at least seen, the most deals in food ever in the world, because he used to run an organization called FoodX, which invests very broadly across the food and food tech landscape. Before that, he has a background at Harvard Business School. He started out his career at Procter and Gamble. He worked in a bank for a while, and then after FoodX, he started something called Big Idea Ventures, which he's going to tell us about. So I'm not going to ruin the surprise there. But our major goal here is for the people on the call to get to know Big Idea Ventures, get to know Andrew and his team, and hopefully consider applying to Big Idea Ventures' current cohort. The applications are closing very soon, so we're hoping that you'll be able to rapidly put through applications within the next couple of weeks. So Andrew, over to you.
Okay, I'm unmuting. Can people hear me?
Absolutely, we can.
Fantastic. Actually, before we get into me, because it's always my favorite subject, Pratik asked a question which we didn't get to, which was basically talking about plant-based meats. People believe these products are highly processed. How do we overcome this from a broader perspective? That perception is actually accurate in the beginning. So over the last, let's say, 2-3 years, companies that were producing well-known plant-based products were really trying to hit the taste target, and they were doing that through any means necessary. All number of processed ingredients and all sorts of different ingredients that you would probably put in a Twinkie rather than a plant-based product. I think we're starting to get into generation 2, and in some cases generation 3, where people are still able to hit that taste target, but with far fewer ingredients, more natural ingredients, more raw ingredients, simpler, cleaner kind of nutritional panels, etc. Some really good examples of that in the market would be the Abbott's Butcher out of the west coast of the United States, which I think in most cases uses about 7 or 8 ingredients, and they're all natural ingredients that you can find in a kind of regular grocery store or in a regular natural food store. It's much more about how they process those natural ingredients and texturize them versus adding all sorts of numbers and processed bits and pieces in there. Another company is a company out of Israel called Real Bites, RILBYTES, and that's again, I think that's 7 or 8 ingredients, including chickpeas and cranberries and lentils and various other kind of very natural ingredients. They get the color, for example, from the cranberry rather than from a heme that they've genetically modified. So great question. And I think we're getting into, Gen 2, Gen 3 with plant-based foods, where we're able to get taste and less ingredients, more raw ingredients, cleaner cleaner ingredients, because we're just getting smarter at it. Okay, does that answer your question, Pratik? You're nodding. I can see your lips moving, but I can't hear anything. I assume that's a yes. Fantastic. Okay, so now we're going to very quickly go through Big Idea Ventures. Forgive the weird background, but it's 1 a.m. Actually, it's 1:07 a.m. in New York. Actually, I'm not in New York. I'm in Princeton, but it's easier for people to picture New York than Princeton. So we're going to go into what Big Idea Ventures is all about. And the purpose of me doing this at 1 a.m. in the morning is because we are actively looking for as many great entrepreneurs as possible from India. I came and spent a week with the GFI guys. They, kindly took me around in multiple taxis and other modes of transportation around India to meet all sorts of wonderful people. And the whole purpose of that expedition was to find great people who were interested in building the kind of plant-based ecosystem in India. We firmly believe that as a continent, it's one of the most exciting places to build this plant-based, cell-based ecosystem, and we're really enthusiastic about doing so. So if there's one thing before I even start speaking that we want you to sort of take out of the next kind of 15 minutes, 20 minutes, it's, if it's not you that wants to start a business, if it's your next door neighbor, if it's your cousin, if it's your sister, if it's your brother, if it's your friend, tell them to, whether it's through GFI or through the Big Idea Ventures, contact us, because long story short, we want to find great entrepreneurs and we want to give them money and we want to empower them to be successful and to grow amazing businesses that will change the world. That's kind of the very short elevator pitch of why we're doing this. I'm going to share my screen and then we'll talk a little bit about, I think we're going to do this. Allow Zoom to, forgive me if,
Yeah, I think you should be able to share.
okay.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, does that, you can see it or you can't see it?
No, we can't see it yet. Your video's on.
You cannot see it. Okay, desktop, share. Okay, awesome.
Perfect.
You can see it now, yes?
Yes, we can see your desktop, including the Microsoft, PPT version. Perfect.
Can you see one slide or 100 slides?
We can see presenter's view, so we can see all 27 of them.
Or 50 million of them. Fabulous. In fact, so I don't get to do presenter's view today. No problem. I'll just pivot. Okay. So just to kind of go through very quickly what we're doing. I'm not expecting you guys to read the slides. Please don't do that. It means your ears will stop working and you won't be listening to what I'm saying. So listen to what I'm saying and let me pull a couple of the data points out for you. So we're a fund and we're focused specifically on plant-based and cell-based entrepreneurs. We're in the process of closing somewhere between $50 and $100 million. We invest globally. We'll invest in any amazing entrepreneur with any amazing company in any part of the world, with the possible exception of North Korea. So as we're not presenting to North Korea today, it shouldn't matter. We also have something called an accelerator. We have one in New York City. We have one in Singapore, and we're actually proactively trying to see if we can put one together in India. We'll let you guys fight amongst yourselves in terms of whether it's in Mumbai or New Delhi or Bangalore or some other wonderful location. Everyone I talk to has an opinion. Nobody agrees on it. So these two accelerators currently are New York and Singapore. If we found a fabulous company from India in the plant-based space that we wanted to give money to and work with, we would probably ask you in the short term to come hang out with us in Singapore for 5 months, unless there's 100 wonderful companies from India, at which point we would open an accelerator tomorrow. So why are we doing this? Why a new protein? Varun has gone through a lot of this, so I'm going to skip through very, very quickly. But a couple of things to note. 7 out of 10 people in the world have reduced their meat consumption for health reasons. We've got consumers actively pursuing a plant-based diet. We've got 1 in 4 18 to 24-year-olds in the US moving towards a vegan lifestyle in the past 12 years, and it's a rapidly growing, enormous, profitable market. So in other words, the money's there, the people are moving in the right direction. It's an absolutely categorically relevant lifestyle for health reasons. If you go and look at the Heart Foundation, the Cancer Foundation, any of these medically driven bodies as it relates to health, whether it's cancer, heart, obesity, etc., all of them recommend more plant-based in people's diets, less animal protein. It's just, unequivocal. So, whether it's personal health, whether it's climate, whether it's financial, there's multiple reasons why getting more involved in plant-based food as a personal choice or as a business is actually a smart thing to do. The 3 reasons why we're involved are climate, health, and animal welfare. Varun's covered it very, very well. GFI are the absolute thought leaders in this, in the kind of rationale and the data for this. So I can't say this because of who's on the line. I don't want to beat a dead horse. You can't say that to GFI. They get really upset using those kind of expressions. But, we're doing it for climate change reasons. We're doing it for personal health reasons and animal welfare. So there are 3 areas that we specifically focus on. And again, in terms of focus, I mean, give money to great investors, great entrepreneurs. The first is plant-based products. So plant-based meat, seafood, dairy, and eggs, that includes. On the cell-based side, it's again, cell-based meat, seafood, and dairy. And then in the middle, we basically talk about ecosystem drivers. What we mean by that is technologies, ingredients, new ways of doing things that will facilitate either A, the plant-based category, or B, the cell-based category. Is everyone on the line familiar with the difference between plant-based and cell-based? Because I don't want to assume that we're all at exactly the same level of interest in this space. Plant-based is basically, just for those that don't know, is basically taking plant-based ingredients and usually blending them to give them the appearance and taste and texture of a meat, seafood, or dairy product. Cell-based, that's a very simplified kind of a description. Cell-based is where you take a cell from an existing animal or an egg or some kind of biologic construct, and you multiply that cell and you build the item out of those cells. One example of that is a company we invested in called Gourmet. Gourmet is the first cell-based company in France. They're based in Paris. We relocated them to Singapore. They basically take the cell of a duck egg, which they then convince that cell that it's no longer just a regular cell, it's actually a liver cell. And then they feed that duck liver cell plant-based fat until it becomes a fatty cell, and then they multiply it. Those steps and the output is foie gras. So you no longer have to torture an animal, force feeding it grain until it explodes, and then take the liver, the fatty liver from that animal. You can actually just make the cell become a fatty liver cell, which you can then puree and put in a jar and let people smear it on their bread. Sounds kind of gross.
Sorry to interrupt. Yeah. I just wanted to underline what Andrew is saying there, that this is a great example of technology basically making things that we've been doing for generations and centuries allowing us to re-examine those things. What he just described, the process of making foie gras, is exactly accurate. So you take an animal, a duck or a goose, and you, well, a duck in this case, and you force feed that animal until it literally explodes, until its liver becomes so fatty that it literally explodes. And this is something that's been going on in France and other places for a very, very long time, right? And France is one of the most, what's a less bad way to describe this? I guess I'll say snooty. One of the most snooty food cultures anywhere in the world, right? So one of the worries within GFI and GFI Europe was, how are we going to crack France? Because, you know, I mean, these are all new categories of food, and the French are quite traditional with their food. So it turns out when this company Gourmet comes out and they says, well, we can make foie gras without all of this animal cruelty, the French government starts supporting them and the EU government starts supporting them. They've received a number of grants and they're doing extremely well. So it's hugely encouraging that companies like these are coming up and saying, look, we don't have to do things like we've always done them. And so, yeah, we're glad that BIV is supporting that company as well. It's really great.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, the two biggest markets for foie gras outside of France are China and Japan. So there actually is a logic for why these guys have relocated their business to Singapore, because it gives them a jump point for the Asia market. Really interesting company. Okay, this is highly complex. I'm going to skip through this. I'm going to skip through the fund, because this is typically what we say to people when they're about to write us a $10 million check. You guys don't need to know this. Okay, this is the important stuff. The New Protein Accelerator. So we hold 2 cohorts every year in 6 monthly intervals. In other words, we have a program that lasts for 5 months. Then we spend a month looking for the next companies that we're going to invest in, and then we start it all over again. We give those companies $200,000 in the form of $125,000 in cash and $75,000 in kind. What in kind means is we spend 5 months with you full time, working in our offices, in our workspaces. Alongside you, we have a team dedicated to you who are basically focused on working with you to scale your business, find the right co-manufacturers, the right distributors, the right brokers, figure out the channels to market with you, then to leverage our relationships to get you into the grocery sector, to get you into food service. For those that don't know, food service is the kind of term for businesses which sell to universities, schools, hospitals, prisons, and other kind of and restaurants and coffee shops and that sort of things. If you sell food to an entity which then uses that food for other people, that's food service. Okay, so we then spend 5 months we've spent 5 months working with each of our companies, and it's about helping them to scale their businesses and go from 0 to 500, $1 million plus in terms of revenues. Our goal is also to get you additional funding from other investors and ourselves. At the end of that 5 month period, we kind of make a decision about whether or not we believe you as a company are going to be long-term successful and impactful and world-changing. If you are, we'll allocate somewhere between $1 and $3 million to your company over the next few years to make sure that you can really grow your business successfully. So the $200,000 in the beginning is really just so that we can spend time with you in our accelerator. After that, we allocate to the top performing companies somewhere between $1 and $3 million. And we work proactively with you to find other investors as well, i.e. companies, other investors, for example, who are part of the Glasswall Syndicate and other organizations that are about funding plant-based and cell-based companies. Worth noting that there is something out there called the Glasswall Syndicate. That's a group of about 180 to 200 investors around the world who are dedicated to investing capital in plant-based and cell-based companies. So across those 200 investors, VCs, angels, etc., there's, I don't know if it's I don't know if it's $500 million worth of capital available, or $1 billion, or whatever. It'd be kind of pleasant to sort of Varun and team to figure out how much money is available to plant-based and cell-based companies through the Glasswall Syndicate, which we are a part of. But it's a significant amount of money, and they're all very much focused on supporting plant-based and cell-based companies. That's what they do. So our goal over the next 4 years is to find 100 plus companies who we believe will become the next kind of household names in plant-based and cell-based. It's kind of our belief that we've seen innovation in burgers, we've seen innovation in sausages and milks, and to some degree yogurts. But if you think about the entire landscape of food and all of the different and multiple categories and multiple brands, if there's an animal protein as a core ingredient or as a secondary ingredient, it's our belief that over the next decade, there will be products to substitute or replace them. So any product that currently has meat or animal protein as a core or in a secondary will be completely replaceable by a product which tastes as good, which is far, far healthier for the individual concerned, far healthier for the planet, and will be at a similar, if not better, price point. Okay, 60% of our fund is focused on companies past the acceleration stage, where we're allocating up to $3.5 million. So you'll see the kind of white number right in the middle there of the screen. We're allocating somewhere up to around $3.5 million in the top performing companies that we've accelerated. The companies that we consider good to great, which is kind of the next level down, we'll allocate up to about $1 million, $1.5 million. So it isn't just about money. It's about working with companies in terms of their business strategy, helping them to figure out how to get the branding right, the packaging right, figuring out how to find the right co-manufacturers to scale the company. One of the interesting things about young companies is they go through inflection points at different stages of their development, where if they don't do that next step right, they potentially fall over and start to have significant issues. So think of it in these terms. People who are starting food businesses often do so in their own kitchens. After that, if they produce something which people like, they go to commercial kitchens, environments where they're paying by the hour, where it's very much about, it's basically producing like they did in their own kitchen, but in a bigger facility. That's throwing people at the problem. The next step is to go into usually a co-manufacturer, a company that has bigger machines that can kind of standardize to some degree the manufacturing process. The small co-packers that people get access to when they've just moved out of a commercial kitchen are often pretty terrible co-manufacturers. They're people and companies who are dealing with entrepreneurs who don't often have very much money and disappear quite quickly and so on. So any co-manufacturer that's dealing with entrepreneurs like that are either very, very risk, they like risk, or they are doing that because they've got no choice, because that's, part of their business model. So often it's very difficult for a first-time entrepreneur to find a co-manufacturer that is consistent and predictable and will always do what they say they're going to do. If they manage to get through that process of bad co-manufacturer and still scale a business, then they will often get to the stage where there's good co-manufacturers. each of those steps, each of those transitions are challenges for companies, and it's our job to know the right co-manufacturers, the right ingredient companies, the right manufacturers, the right brokers, distributors, etc., to make sure that any entrepreneur can scale their company successfully, first nationally and then internationally, without having significant problems and ceasing to exist. This shows a typical week working with us in our accelerator. Very complex, so I won't spend any time on this at all. But just to kind of finish the point off about that typical week, we typically spend Mondays working with our companies in board meetings, looking at the week strategies, the specific things we want to achieve together in the week, the gaps that the companies have and how they need to fix them, what resources they're looking for, what mentors they need to kind of fill up some of those gaps, to solve some of the problems. That's the kind of Monday board meeting. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of that week is dedicating my team and those companies to addressing this week's set of challenges, the gaps that they've identified. Perhaps it's they need to improve their packaging. Perhaps the product needs to be reformulated in some way because they're not getting consumers nodding their head and being as enthusiastic as they want. But specifically, each week we deal with a set of challenges that are individual to the companies, and then we move that company forward through mentorship and through, you know, proactively trying to address the problems. Okay, in terms of who's involved in the company, I am. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here at 1:20 in the morning. As someone mentioned already, I started my career at Procter & Gamble in brand management. I went then to business school, and while there started my first company, and I've spent the last 20 years basically starting different companies, either myself or with friends or with, you know, other people that I get enthusiastic about. Most recently, I took over responsibility for a food tech accelerator and invested in about 40 different food companies. And since undertaking big idea ventures, have invested in another 14 or 15 companies. So at this point, it's 55 plus companies that I've invested in. But we were getting about 1,000 deals a year that we were having to evaluate and ultimately make decisions on at FoodX. And at this point, when we launched Big Idea Ventures, we ended up getting about 250 companies applying for what was about 12 places. So, you know, 250 companies and scaling, going through each of those companies to find 12 that we wanted to support. Tom is recently joined us full time. Tom is the co-founder of Tyson's venture group. He resigned from that role to join us. He's going to be building a particular part of our business out, which is actually a larger fund. And Christian is the person heading up Asia for us out of Singapore. He was the first international employee at a company called Just. Just, I think, was the first plant-based unicorn in the industry with a plant-based egg product. I think they also did a mayonnaise and a few other bits and pieces. Josh Tetrick is the CEO of that company, completely bloody insane, but they're doing some cool things. We have a team on the acceleration side across the US and Asia. I think you'll notice if you can't, the pixels on the screen aren't clear enough, but basically I'm the only male on the screen. We're quite focused on getting more women into venture capital. Right now, there's actually a terrible ratio of male to female in the venture capital space, and I think that's a kind of a waste and a poor approach. So we are, you know, proactively finding the smartest, best women who can join the team and do a fabulous job of working with companies and helping them to become successful. Each person on this team has kind of a number of reasons why they're on the team and why they're kicking butt. One thing we've done, which most people don't do, I don't know if this is the GFI influence, but we actually recruited PhD, food PhD folks to the team, food technologists, but biomolecular technologists to the team, and so on, food scientists. It's our belief that this isn't an industry that you can guess about. You actually need to know what you're doing. So these folks are full-time, and they're focused on helping us to do due diligence to figure out which are the best companies who have really unique, innovative products and technologies. They help our companies to improve their products in terms of ingredients, how the ingredients work together, getting the right texture of the ingredients, and so on. These folks are rock stars in kind of food technology. They're probably the next generation of the kind of Ryan Bethencourts and the Ron Shagadas of the food industry. Cool, these guys are just really, really quite cool. Talking of Ron Shigata and Ryan Bethencourt, those guys are on the advisory board to Big Idea Ventures, and we've got some other folks. I don't know if anyone recognizes the chap with the big ears on the right-hand side there. That's Bruce. Bruce is the chap who, I think he's the co-founder, right? He's the co-founder of GFI. Yeah. So Bruce is Bruce in India still, or did he go home?
No, he has a TED Talk tomorrow, by the way, at TEDx Gateway.
So Bruce, and I'm not just saying this because GFI are hosting me, Bruce is an amazing guy, super smart, super pragmatic, really, thoughtful about how we kind of change the world. And it's not change the world by banging people on the head and by being a kind of aggressive activist. It's by being really logical and smart about how to get it done. And it comes back to my brother is an English football hooligan. He is a, fish and chips, and I don't recall if it's Chelsea football team or Arsenal or Manchester United, but it's one of those. It's some excuse to have a fight with someone on a Saturday afternoon. And he wouldn't be seen dead eating anything vegan. Like, he just would not eat this kind of food. So I know we've done the right thing when one of my companies that's produced something that happens to be vegan, I can give it to my brother and he can taste it, love it, want to go buy it before he finds out that it's actually good for him and doesn't include, the flesh of an animal. And that's what we need to get to. We need to get to products which are better for people, better for the planet, and they just happen to not have animal in them, and yet they're still wonderfully delicious. And that's the strategy. Anyway, enough of that. Tyson and Tomasuk were the first investors into our fund. We've already raised around $25 million, give or take, and we're halfway through the process. So this is always the most fun stuff. I want to give you some examples of companies we've already given money to, companies that we thought were really exciting. And this kind of is to help you guys sort of think about how entrepreneurs are just sort of changing things. It's easy to, when you start thinking about the climate change and animal welfare and all the kind of challenges that Varun quite rightly identified, you can be super pessimistic about this whole thing. I'm actually super optimistic. I believe that there's a number of entrepreneurs out there who will solve these problems, or at least delay them for some time. I think entrepreneurs and engineers and scientists will help us get out of the mess we've got ourselves into. It has nothing to do with politicians, academics, lawyers, policemen, and all the other professions out there. It's only going to come down to entrepreneurs, scientists, engineers, and the smart business people who give them the resources to do what they need to do. So the Greener Kitchen, these guys started with a restaurant, and people loved their vegan products. And it got to the point where after lots of experimentation, lots of different products launched through the restaurant, just kind of different recipes, different experimentations, they came to the conclusion that there was just a small handful of products which people loved and asked for so much that it actually made sense for them to figure out how to manufacture those products at scale and bring them to market. This is not, the photograph you see here is not what they're bringing to market. They're actually bringing 3 products at first, which is a plant-based mayonnaise, a plant-based ranch dressing, and a chipotle mayonnaise. That's going to be the first product they bring to market through food service. So you're going to be able to get their products in restaurants, in ballparks, in sports stadiums, when you get your Impossible Burger or your Beyond Burger or whatever it is you're buying in a stadium, and their mayonnaise will be the product that goes with that. Grounded. There are a lot of plant-based cheese companies out there, and most of them are doing it with cashew nuts. Cashew is kind of one of the key kind of ingredients for plant-based cheese. Some companies are using coconut oil and tapioca and kind of other formulations. This is a company out of Australia. He was a master chef. He had a very high-end restaurant in Australia. I think it was called La Luna. Anyway, this chap has a range of cheeses, a Gouda, a Camembert, and a feta cheese. And the Gouda and the Camembert is made from cauliflower, and the feta cheese is made from hemp. And the products are incredible. You know, the kind of cashew nut cheeses that are out there are basically solidified nut butters. They're not that great. This cauliflower based cheese is just mouth-watering. It's incredible, which in itself is amazing, because most people find cauliflower to be the most boring vegetable there is, and I wouldn't disagree with them. But as far as the cheese is concerned, it's the only time I've ever seen a cauliflower that I like. Patch Organics have produced a pumpkin seed milk. A lot of milks are made from almond. Almond has a negative impact on the environment in terms of how it's harvested. Also, it's an allergen. So people who are allergic to nuts will often find they're allergic to almonds. This is entirely made from pumpkin seed and water and a few other natural ingredients. Really interesting product, very creamy, very tasty. Revolution Gelato is a plant-based ice cream, although I would get hung up by my earlobes by the FDA if I called it ice cream. I'm not allowed. We have to call it gelato. It wins awards versus ice cream. It's just a really tasty product. Just really, really very good. Looks, tastes, smells like ice cream. It's got significantly less fat, and it's just delicious. Now, this is interesting. This is Please cheese. I call this performance cheese. And what I mean by that is plant-based cheese will often not do what it's supposed to do versus regular cheese. So, for example, if you put a plant-based cheese slice on top of a burger, an Impossible or a Beyond or any other burger, often it will just sit there like a piece of plastic. It doesn't melt like a slice of cheese should. It doesn't get sticky. It doesn't, you know, act like cheese. It just sits there. This chap's cheese tastes like cheese, looks like cheese, smells like cheese, and will melt at exactly the right temperature on top of a burger so that it looks like a piece of melted cheese. It's just, you know, it does what it's supposed to do. Also, he has another type of cheese which looks like is a shredded cheese that goes on pizza. Pizza ovens cook between 500 and 800 degrees. The cheese, plant-based cheese that you typically put on a pizza in a pizza oven will vaporize and disappear at that temperature. This guy's cheese melts on top of a pizza in an oven of high temperatures. When you take it out, cut it and bite it, it stretches as if it's regular cheese and it tastes like cheese. All of these cheeses are made from a white bean. Uproot have their own milks, and they're putting milk machines into universities. Universities currently use cartons. Those cartons create a lot of shipping cost and waste in universities in particular, where they just got lots and lots and lots of paper and silver foil and plastic cartons and so on. This is a machine which has soy milk, oat milk, chocolate pea milk, coconut milk, and the student goes up and just puts the cup or glass underneath and gets served. In the universities where they have these, it increased the consumption of plant-based milk by 72%, and reduced regular dairy milk by about 40%. So people were using more plant-based milk overall when they were given a choice between regular milk. You can see on the left-hand side of the picture, this Road Fresh, that's regular milk. Beside it is the plant-based milk. When you give students a choice of either serving themselves a glass of milk or plant-based milk, they actually end up using plant-based milk a lot more often. Really interesting. Singapore cohort. Black sheep is a plant-based lamb product. This is just amazing. It tastes like lamb, and I know because I'm not a vegan. It tastes like lamb, it looks like lamb, it sizzles like lamb, it cooks like lamb, but is actually a plant-based product. I think it has about 4 or 5 ingredients. It certainly isn't the 18 to 25 or 30 that other kind of first generation plant-based products and burgers have. You can use it as a burger. You can also use it as a shish kebab or some other format. It can be manipulated into whatever format is culturally relevant. Future Food is a plant-based pork. They're based in China, and you can use the pork product in multiple formats as if it were a regular piece of pork. So, you know, Italian-style spaghettis, Chinese-style dishes, you know, whatever you might want to use it for. Gourmet we discussed. This is the Gourmet foie gras product, which is a cell-based company, which is taking the cell from a duck egg. Karana has developed a Chinese-style dumpling, xiaoling bao, and the ingredient is entirely 100% plant-based, but tastes like a traditional Chinese meat dumpling. And again, from our point of view, we don't want just to make people eat American-style burgers that are plant-based around the world and have everyone adopting a kind of a culturally insensitive approach. What we want to do is to recognize the foods that people love and that are a strong part of their culture, and eaten in large volumes, and make those products available in plant-based versions that taste as good, if not better than the original, and at the same price point. So in this case, we were looking for a very traditional tasting Chinese dumpling that would be plant-based, but would taste like the meat alternative. And that's it. We invite you to join us. In other words, you know, if you hear of any wonderful plant-based, cell-based companies, please tell them about us. You know, if you happen to be one, you know, reach out to us. If you know, if your friend, cousin, someone you don't like very much even is involved in plant-based or cell-based, still tell them about us. We can just give them a slightly harder time if you don't like them very much. So if you have any questions, I've probably gone over by about 3 hours, but if you have any questions, please let me know.
So quickly chiming in here, we have a couple of questions, Andrew, in the chat box that you can take a look at. And there's also the sheet, obviously, which we can redirect you to. By the way, members who've just joined in, we have a sheet which I'll just put in the comment box. And at the end, after finishing, I think we can take 2 to 3 questions. And after that, I can quickly run everybody through what our GFI Ideas India community is as well. Thank you so much for everyone who joined us today. And I'll let Andrew take up a couple of questions now from the chat box.
Yeah, where are the questions? Do I have to stop sharing my screen?
I think so, yes.
End show. And what a show it was too. Okay.
Absolutely. I think all of us found a lot of insights from these companies. I've been receiving a lot of private messages telling me that the presentation went really well. And I think a lot of our entrepreneurs, I can see from the participants that there are a bunch of entrepreneurs actually who have joined us on the call today. And all of them are from a lot of different fields that we've been engaging with over the past couple of years in India. So that's great. I think there are some questions here around spirit.
There are.
Yeah.
And I'm just seeing that around 15 minutes ago, I think you were typing to me saying I've got 5 minutes left. So sorry about that, dude. I couldn't see it.
No worries.
Sorry.
I think all of us enjoyed it. There are a few questions here, Andrew,
Yeah.
at 11:54 a.m. So if you could see those.
Yeah, I've got some. Would it be wrong to name them ice cream replacement or mock ice cream? So actually, what people tend to call them at the moment is gelatos. So gelatos are an expression that generally means ice cream, but is not using the cream word. That what people in the industry are objecting to is kind of consumers supposedly being so unintelligent that if you call it a plant-based dairy product, they're going to assume there's dairy in it, when we all know that people kind of understand that plant-based does mean that it's not an animal-based product at all. I think it's just people in the industry trying to box out the kind of plant-based companies any way they can. There's 2 ways of approaching, you know, plant-based. One is to feel fear if you're in the industry and try and combat it. The other is to embrace it and realize it's another opportunity to give your consumers choice, and you can actually sell both kinds of products and make more money. Unfortunately, some companies take the wrong approach. What stage should one apply for the new protein? Sorry?
Eligibility criteria around the for your new protein accelerator, like cohort 2, what was a common theme? Like a lot of people privately messaged me about it as well. So if you could just
so what's the common theme?
No, the eligibility criteria for cohort
got you.
startups at what stage, etc., etc.
Yeah, so my company is called Big Idea Ventures for a reason, and that's we're looking for companies that have the potential to change the world. We're looking for big ideas. We're looking for companies that aren't just trying to do the same things as everybody else. You know, I can't tell you how many applications we had for plant-based burgers. And when you read the application, it didn't sound or look anything different than any of the other plant-based burgers out there, right? So we're looking for big ideas. We're looking for people who have something which is, if they can realize their vision, that company can actually be a global phenomenon that does, changes the world. We're not trying to incrementalize this. We're trying to find companies that are groundbreaking. So that's kind of what we're looking for. Very tough to do, very, very tough to do. We're also looking for great teams. You'll always hear that when you talk to an investor. The reality is that you know, the founder and the founding teams are always the kind of magical ingredient that makes something work. I've actually had situations where a product's been pretty horrible, but the team behind it were actually really quite good, and I knew that they would never quit. And so I actually sat them down before I invested and said, you guys are amazing. I trust you. I think you're going to, you know, do what it takes to change everything about your product until you get it right. But right now your product stinks, and I'm still going to invest. But you do need to change your product pretty damn quickly. You need to go out there and talk to consumers and figure out how to make it right and how to make it better. You're the right team to do it. Your product isn't the right product to get there. So in that case, it wasn't even about the product. It was much more about the people behind that who you know, I had faith in. Selection criteria. So you don't need to have, you know, 100 store distribution. You don't need to have a final finished perfect product with everything baked, with all the price points figured out and all the marketing and all the branding. You don't need to have all of that. What you need to have is the big idea. How is this groundbreaking? How is this going to change the world? How is this going to, if you achieve all the things you believe you can achieve, how are you going to make this something that people in many households around the world are going to be consuming on a day-to-day basis and being happy, healthy, you know, climate appreciating consumers? Vitamin B12 content, blah, blah. Okay. Please check the above sign-in sheet. Kindly do not introduce yourself in the chat. Okay.
I think there were a couple of questions around novel, like for example, novel and biodiverse sources of concentrates and isolates from India, like in a B2B kind of a segment. Are those companies eligible as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. So right now, the kind of 2 or 3 key ingredients for plant-based foods are pea protein, wheat, soy. Soy is an allergen. More and more people are allergic to soy in the US and other places. So soy is losing its halo of kind of its halo as being a great ingredient for plant-based. Pea protein, a couple of key companies that produce pea protein isolate, and those companies and I have sat down over the last year or two and kind of looked at the demand that they're getting for their kind of pea protein isolate from Just Impossible and Just kind of 2 or 3 of the key companies in this space, and they cannot produce enough raw ingredients to meet the demand from just those 2 or 3 companies. And that's not to take into consideration the demand for pea protein isolate from the hundreds and hundreds of other companies. So we're going to get quite quickly, because of the just dramatic demand for plant-based products, we're going to get a significant shortage in the core ingredients that are the most commonly used ingredients today. That means that we need to start expanding into experimenting, finding, using other ingredients to deliver on the kind of demand for these products. So that's more legumes, lupins, other kinds of beans, other kinds of peas. Chickpea is going to become a lot more popular. You know, a lot, which is very good for India, because India is a kind of major grower of chickpeas. So, you know, yes, the answer is we're looking for really interesting ingredients. You know, we're looking for new ingredients that will allow us to hit the taste targets that we want to hit for consumers, but aren't wheat, aren't pea protein, and aren't soy. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for other ingredients, especially for India.
Makes sense. And I think some of the questions were that if products are already soy, I think that's always fine, that if you're currently using soy, as long as you're replicating plant-based meat textures to actually match the slaughtered meat texture, I think you're fine on that criteria. Thank you so much for everyone for joining our call today, and hope to see you in our community and on the next monthly call. Have a good day. Bye.
Perfect.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.